Now, if you're like most leaders today, you're actually creating more problems than you're solving, and you don't even know it. And I'm talking about big problems, problems that have significant long-term consequences for you, your organization, both now and in the future. How can this be, you're probably wondering? It's because these problems are invisible to you. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is you can find these problems and you can fix these problems if you know what to look for and where to look. The way I see it, every leader stands on an invisible three-legged stool. Now, the strength and stability of this stool determines the quality of your leadership. And the quality of your leadership establishes the ultimate potential for how successful you can become as a leader. And as responsibility increases, it becomes even more critical that your stool is strong and stable and well-balanced. Because as your responsibility continues to grow, the height of your stool continues to grow as well. In fact, the taller your stool, the more visibility that everyone has to you, your leadership behaviors, and your influence. Now, every component of the stool represents a unique set of leadership behaviors. Now, as I walk you through the stool, I'm going to introduce you to a client of mine named Beth. Now, Beth was in charge of the training and development department for a large financial services organization. And Beth was very well respected in her organization. In fact, she'd been promoted twice in less than 18 months. The challenge with Beth, which is the same with a lot of executives today, she didn't see the full picture. In fact, you may be a leader who looks like you're successful today, but you might not be seeing the full picture either. Now, when I met Beth, she was focused on the top of the stool. Now, the top of the stool is the area that is the things you think of whenever you describe the job you have. So these are the things that are in your job description. They're the things that your boss and the board ask you about. These things matter, and they matter a lot. Because frankly, without these things, you wouldn't have a role in the first place. So now Beth, she was doing a pretty good job on the surface. Now, like most executives, Beth didn't know to look under the surface. For example, leg number one is the leg I call managing self. Now, within the idea of managing self, there are several unique concepts that come into play here that differentiate the great leaders from the average ones. Now, Beth, she specifically had issues with self-care. She would work 12-hour days running from meeting to meeting, often eating an unhealthy lunch at her desk while she sat on conference calls. You know, she rarely got a moment throughout the entire day to even catch her breath. By the time she got home from work, she would collapse on the couch without an ounce of energy to spare. You know, she had nothing left in her tank for her husband, her teenage son, or the 2 cats that she loved so much. By a quick show of hands, how many of you have had days like Beth? About 100%. It's way too common today. Way too common. Now, the more I spoke with Beth about her habits and her routines, she started to admit to me that her quality of life had gotten so poor that she rarely ever felt good physically. She didn't pay attention too well in meetings. She didn't think clearly. You know, the reality was her relationships with her family were suffering. She was going down a very poor road. But I got to give it to Beth. She decided to change. She did a 180. She was committed to making a difference. She proactively shifted the way she approached her days. She was intentional about the meetings she ran and how she participated in meetings. In fact, she made time every day to refresh and reset multiple times throughout the day. When it was all said and done, Beth actually strengthened her main leg of managing self. Now, Beth also had challenges with leg number 2. This is the leg that I call considering others. Now, under the topic of considering others, just like managing self, there are several unique aspects. Now, Beth had issues with several of them. And I will never forget the day that Beth and I sat at my conference room table. I mean, I was not prepared when Beth burst into tears. I'd never seen anything like it before. She said to me, "Oh my God, I had no idea. My people hate me." Now, to be fair, Beth's people did not hate her, but they were extremely frustrated with her. One of them called her a micromanager. One of them said he wasn't learning anything and he wasn't growing. And yet another one said he was actually looking for another job specifically because of Beth. You know, in this example, Beth was so focused on the work that she was completely unaware of the impact she was having on other people. You know, it's another opportunity for me to ask you, how often are you so focused on the work of the day that you neglect your consideration for other people? You know, the final leg is leg number 3. I call it mentality and approach. And it is arguably the most important leg of all, because your mentality and your approach sets the stage for everything you do. It helps you decide how to prioritize your time and energy on the work, how you manage yourself, and how you interact with other people. Just like the other legs, there are many different aspects within this topic of mentality and approach. Now for Beth, her specific issue was an imbalance between the technical side of work and the human side of work. She was almost exclusively focused on how to technically and effectively, what she thought was, run her department. She was completely void of the human side. We've already talked about the fact that she completely neglected herself, and her consideration of others was solely centered around the technical aspects of their job. Again, another opportunity to pause and reflect and ask you, how often are you so focused on the technical aspects of your job or the problem or challenge that you're dealing with today that you completely ignore the fact that you're dealing with humans in a real world here? The reality is, I can tell you that Beth, I was so proud of her. Over time, she got so focused on changing and improving all aspects of her that her mentality and approach did a 180. She took a well-balanced approach that considered all aspects of being a successful leader. It's been a few years since I worked with Beth, but I keep in contact with her regularly, and it always warms my heart because she is thriving now. I mean, she loves her job, her people are happy, and she's happy. It's amazing, so it's such a good testament to what's possible when a leader gets focused on doing what they need to do to have a good, strong, stable stool. So remember, even though the stool is simple in its concepts, each of the elements are incredibly powerful. And it's within these concepts that differentiate the great leaders from the average ones. Remember, a good, strong stool has the top of the stool, the work, leg number 1, successfully managing self, leg number 2, appropriate consideration of others, and leg number 3, the right mentality and approach. So I would ask you, might you be one of these leaders who's actually creating more problems than you're solving? And if that's the case, what are you going to do about it?